You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, our Friday edition. Thanks for joining us once more. Well, the grain markets have a little more spring in their step this week, thanks to the new USDA crop acreage report, which came out on Tuesday. And we'll dissect that and get into what's going to happen with the markets from here potentially as well with Dan O'Brien, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension. Dan, along with us from his office in Colby, Northwest Kansas. So what a shot in the arm for the markets, Dan, and sort of out of the blue, particularly when you consider that corn number. Folks wondering, where did the acreage go?
Well, where did the seed sales go? Honestly, when you think back in past years when we've had issues like this, we're hearing rumors of this and challenges of that in terms of seed not going out and things not coming in, and we heard none of that. There were some early surveys done, and well, actually in the midst of COVID-19 first impacts, especially when the ethanol industry suffered so badly. We were wondering, gosh, we're going to drop to what, 92 million acres or something, and here now this report came in, and pre-report expectations were I think they were for 94 or something like that on the low side, and then this 92 came in, and really the challenge of this is that again, this survey was based on early June stuff, and it says 92.066 million acres. The USDA says right on that acreage report that they're still anticipating 2.2 million acres to be planted beyond that to get up to the 92. So what they actually had in hand by the time they measured that was about 89.5 to 90 million acres, which is, wow. And the soybean number is not incomprehensible because, again, you can plant soybeans later, but it's just amazing number to projecting 83.8 million acres planted, and saying as of June 1 that there were 12.1 of those that still weren't in the ground. So, wow, this is a big deal. We've had some sizable rains since then in some of those areas. It's spotty, but interesting. And again, we were running right up into crop insurance report dates and all. And I think this is the northern U.S. story, primarily in North Dakota, some of those areas where they had problems carried over from last year. And maybe that's the story behind all this, in that we had such problems from last year, delayed harvest, et cetera, wet, soggy fields up in there. And what we did hear of this was that, gosh, it was taking a while to get the old crop out and get the new one going. And we have in the report info, the USDA did, and we reproduced it in our weekly notes, the planted acreage numbers by different states. And again, you see particularly North Dakota where these issues had come up. So
one has to earnestly wonder, though, Dan, on both counts, but particularly with corn, what the odds are of attaining that extra 2 million acres and 12 million acres for soybeans.
Well, you would have to wonder whether they'll get to all of that. But we don't want to put ourselves in the position of betting against the ingenuity and drive and motivation of U.S. farmers. But in some of those areas, it's pretty wet, and I wouldn't be surprised if they end up with that or less. I would think, and for both those crops, and I wonder now where, with the upcoming July WASDE report, which still, well, the WASDE report is going to take these acres as given. These acres will hold on to, unless there's really a surprise, all the way to, I think, either the August or September crop report. Wouldn't be surprised if it's the September, but USDA will decide. But, so here we're in July 1, we'll go through July, probably through August, maybe into September, 60 days, 65, 70 days, that we'll have a perspective based on these planted acres. And if it does come in short, we won't have a verification on that until September. So it sets us up for volatility. And it's just so amazing, Eric. Again, as we were in May, oh, the sky's falling. We'll never get out of this in one fell swoop. And a surprise apparently to the whole market that acres are really short and or likely to be short and still at risk. And if you don't mind, I'll just hop over into that. So where do these balance sheets go? The USDA has, and they came out in that June supply demand balance sheet projection, and they were looking at 97 million acres, and now we're at 92, and hoping we got that at 178 bushels an acre. And in most cases, nobody's really negative on yields. Although I've been hearing what Mary Knapp has talked about in terms of warm nighttime temperatures, and that's worrisome, I think. Anyway, so instead of this 16 billion bushel crop, is it 14 to 14 and a half? And we already were planning on usage to be rationed some because of ethanol and whatever else and feed use. So, but what seems to be off the table, unless I'm really surprised, is instead of us having a 3.3 billion bushel carryout, we're probably back at least down to 2. And thinking, and the last time we were around 2 billion bushel carryout, we had the season average corn price, well, back in 2018, 19, 19, 20 at 360. And the last projection USDA had was 320. Interesting, Dees corn, you look at where it closed on Wednesday, 360. So that seems to be the conservative view of where we're at. And with lower acres, if we have any weather issues, again, we were pretty dry, wondering where this thing was going up until those rains came from Cristobal and whatever else. Well, if it turns dry and we get 175 or 170 bushels per acre, then 13 and a half to 14 billion bushel and of production carry out, certainly below 2, probably closer to 1.5, and that's a very volatile market at higher prices than what we're looking at right now.
So we're really looking at the very least a floor in the market for the foreseeable future, perhaps.
Well, I would think so. And when will we even get better yield numbers verified? We talked about this some last time we spoke. Well, there'll be an August crop report, but it won't be the USDA going out into the field to get enumerated samples. It'll be what farmers tell them and what some satellite info would help with. Pardon me. But then, so we'll get all the way to September, and we'll roll the dice and see where we're at. And the last time we had, here I'm rumor mongering, but the last time we got surprised by hot nighttime temperatures, it came out of right field. We didn't really know where it was that was going to hit us until we got into the field. So there's questions this time around. If I can, I think we should talk about soybeans because that's soy. Go ahead, Eric.
You have to look at the soybeans not only from that acreage perspective that you mentioned earlier, but the stocks numbers. Maybe the enthusiasm there isn't nearly as robust as it is in corn, but nonetheless, there are favorable signals here, are there not?
We're up, down, sideways on what could happen, but we're projecting the USDA in that June WASDE report projected 83.5 million acres that came in here at 83.8, et cetera, but 12 million of that haven't been planted. So really, the surprise would be in how many of the 12 million that weren't planted on June 1 are going to get planted. And if half of that doesn't get planted, well, that's a big deal. And
right.
And so now, so we're opening up the risk of instead of that just under 400 million bushel carryout that the USDA is projected, and it was 900 million 2 years ago, just under 6 last year. Well, now we're at 4, hoping we get there. Any type of weather risk, if you get down to 300 million or back to the old glory days price wise of 200 million or less, then that's just a different world than where we're at. And even if what we're set up for is to be kind of insulated from, I think, more likelihood of being insulated from U.S.-China trade issues, because even if the Chinese go completely elsewhere to go buy beans, and they buy up, they run up the price on Brazilian soybeans, still in that trade, when we come back, we've been down about 20% or so, plus or minus. Well, even with that, if we have lower supplies, then you're able to buffer U.S.-China trade impacts, through that balance sheet more readily. So, I don't want to go all the way from being a complete bear to a complete bull on the thing, but with these numbers, it's you've changed the underlying oversupply assumptions of the market to now where we have to consider. Well, two things have happened. One, we'll come in. We'll probably be USDA will be judicious in its July WASDE report numbers, and they'll up some things. But so that's probably gonna have to happen, no doubt. But the other thing will be that now as you change these expectations down, and prospects for carryouts are not near as good as they were, particularly in corn, the market's going to be more reactive. So from here till we know what we have, instead of having a docile June heading into July without much excitement, and we're in some years when we have a big crop, we just tend to slide all the way into harvest. That thing seems off the table right now, because we don't have the planted acres to sustain, especially for corn, to sustain that oversupply scenario right now. So likelihood of a lot more volatility than we thought we'd be having just from one report.
And we'd be remiss, Dan, in closing, if we didn't talk of the wheat trade, in that we're heading into roughly the latter third, to put it that way, of the harvest here in Kansas, and what we see in the way of prices and where we might be going. What's your read right now?
We were at 420 about 2 days ago. We were closed at 442 at here over on Wednesday, July 1st, and we're in the midst of harvest in Kansas. So you gain 20 cents, 20-cent gift to anybody that has to sell. And just interesting to see where basis levels in the midst of all this. And again, really the best info we have right now is the harvest reports that extension agents give you. And for what you and I, as we've talked, not great disappointment in a lot of parts of Kansas. Is that correct?
By and large, there are pockets, of course, with abandoned acres or substandard wheat, but the tone seems to be as expected or above expectations.
Basis levels, eastern half of the state, really, we're in harvest. We've got 7 under basis levels. So that's something. Out to the west, again, harvest coming on, and 30, 40 cents under, 25 in some locations. That's indicating, but it's not indicating a washout in terms of demand for the crop. And it'd be interesting to see what it portends, what it aims us towards once the combines are through, and then we have to start managing supply and figure out where we go from there.
Well, much more enthusing overtones to the markets than we've talked of in quite some time collectively, Dan. And of course, have a look at his notes on all of this on the agmanager.info website. Many thanks to you, and we will talk again next Friday.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.